get my 6. What's up, everybody? I just spent the last 2 hours mowing, and so if my eyes are red, which they probably are, it's not that I have been participating in that recently legalized stuff here in Virginia. It's that I had about 2 acres worth of those wild onion / chives that are about this tall. So it was like being in the kitchen for 45 minutes chopping onions. So I had eye pro, but no matter how much I stuck them on there, stuff got my eyes. So bear with me. We have a series of thunderstorms coming, or otherwise I would have waited and washed some of this grass off. But the weather would not allow me to do that. So I wanted to come up here today and tell you what I think is kind of a creepy story. It is another beautiful October evening, heading into an October night. You know, there's a couple situations in which just a common, ordinary guy, kind of like myself, can figure out all the solutions for all the world's problems. And some of those situations include campfires, or tailgate parties, sitting around tailgating with a bunch of other common type folk, getting ready for a big football game and just solving the world's problems. And that's the case here with this story from this past weekend. As we always do with every home game, we were tailgating down here, getting ready to watch UVA beat the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And I was talking with a bunch of guys, and it's funny how a conversation will morph and weave its way in and out of different subjects. It started out with me and a couple of guys were talking about how spoiled we are, you know, at the hands of our wives. We have very supportive wives. And, you know, what do they say? Birds of a feather flock together. I don't have anybody that I would call a friend who's in a bad marriage. I don't have a lot of friends, and it's intentional, but the ones that I do have are very close friends. They're very loyal. You know, when I was in the hospital this spring in March, Dearly, I think she posted it on Facebook, and we had half a dozen people calling us at midnight while we were in the emergency room, wanting to know what they could do. One of our friends came and got Dearly and Daniel and let them spend the night with her. Other people were offering it's just really good folks. I'd rather have 5 or 6 friends that I consider to be my close friends than 100 fair-weathered friends or acquaintances or whatever. So I'm very selective, and I'm not surprised that my friends are other guys who have supportive spouses, who appreciate the fact that they have supportive spouses. So we're talking about this stuff, and we're talking about, you know, these guys. And I work from home, as you know, but a lot of the guys were talking about how their friends at work always complaining about their wives, how mean they are to them. And, you know, there's this, whatever, this is part of the story. The guy used to come around here talking about how mean his wife was to him. I don't have that problem. I mean, dealing with my first marriage, I fixed it. I ended it. And now this time around, I'm blessed beyond imagination. So we're talking about this, and then the conversation transforms to, or it transitions to this is like a double-edged sword issue here, this concept. I've used the term beta male before in my videos and in my writing. A lot of the stories, I write short stories or even full-length novels. There's always a beta male or two in there. Let me explain specifically what that is, okay? It's not a man who, you know, it has nothing to do with sexual orientation, gender identification, none of that stuff. I don't knock people because of that kind of stuff. That's a choice. That's a right. None of my business, and I don't care. I don't judge. What I call beta male are these males. I don't use the word man with them because they don't qualify, in my opinion. No ambition, no drive, no work ethic, no goals. Now, there's a lot of people like that, male and female. I had a couple, I don't even want to say friends, but a couple I knew, they type, just an example, they were in their 40s the last time I talked to them, just a few years back, and they were still both going to college, getting their third master's or whatever, they'd figured out a way to live off of grants and student loans and just really never have to, do anything. Work for them. I'm not judging, not my way. So when you see two unmotivated people without ambition, drive, or goals get together, well, it's kind of common. Like I said earlier in the video, birds of a feather flock together. What's always dumbfounded me is when you'll see a beta male shacked up with a alpha female, like an educated, professional, aggressive, assertive, go-getter, bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan type of gal who has work ethic, who has ambition, who has drive. I've always wondered, what is it that I'm missing? I don't get. And the reason we were talking about this is because our wives, my wife at the time being, and these guys' wives, don't work outside of the house. And we were talking about how, because every now and then Dearly will say, my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, every now and then she'll want to work. I say, okay, go work. And she'll go work for a couple of months and she realizes having a job sucks. And our revenues, we actually start losing money on my end because I'm picking up all the stuff around the house that she did, predominantly the cooking, the cleaning, because I'm not going to let my wife go to work all day, then come home and cook or clean. And she would always say, leave this stuff for me. And I'd say, no, I'm not a D word. I'm not a Richard. I've got a new bumper sticker, my new favorite bumper sticker. Get this. I saw it the other day while I was driving and I almost went off the road. I laughed so hard. I told Dearly I was going to share this bumper sticker on YouTube. And she's like, no, you better not. And I'm like, only 1 out of 10 people will get it. And the other 9, if they do, they're going to laugh so hard. I hope they're not offended. Was driving behind a car and they had a bumper sticker that said, go forth and consume a satchel full of Richards. Yeah, you guys get it. I know my audience, you get it. I thought that was just hilarious. So I wasn't going to be a Richard anytime my wife works and have her go work 8 hours a day and then come home and cook and clean and all that stuff. So I would do all that stuff. So our revenues would always drop. And we would talk. I'd say, honey, you can keep that stupid job you don't need as long as you want, but how much more money do we need to not make for you to kind of understand it's counterproductive? And after, like I said, 2 or 3 months, she's like, yeah, and you got the back stabbing in the infighting at work anyway, and so whatever. It's never lasted long. So me and my friends, and they're all business owners, they have their own business. One guy, the guy who's the center of our story here, actually had a garbage business here in Virginia, not in Charlottesville, nowhere close, and I'm not going to say where because there's going to be a part of this story you're going to understand why I don't want to implicate. Everybody's dead already, but just some I guess family secrets are best kept secret. So we're talking about how, when he started his garbage collection business, he couldn't have done it if it hadn't been for his wife being so supportive from the home front. She was a professional, educated woman. She actually stayed back and she did the books, and it's worked out, and they are self-made millionaires several times over. Okay, now he doesn't come out and say that. He's very humble. He doesn't brag, as most self-made. Get my 6. We're in the creepy October Nights forest, so there's something in here. I can't see it, but it's around here. So anyway, yeah, most self-made folks, it's been my experience, who are real, don't go around boasting it. Like I said, somebody who's always telling you about how smart they are probably isn't. Somebody who's always telling you how much money they have probably doesn't. Anybody who's always telling you how great they are probably aren't, unless, of course, their name was Muhammad Ali. Well, he could say it because he had the stuff to back it up with. So anyway, the conversation then transitioned to how it appears to be as if there's a whole new generation of beta males out there, but it's not what it looks like, because I understand economics, and here's the numbers behind this. 50% of all adults 30 and under are living at home now with mom and dad. My generation, Generation X, was the last generation in America to, you know, when you're 18, you're gone. You either go to college, you go to the military, you go to work, but you get out of the house or you're an embarrassment, right? It's not like that anymore, mainly because of the Great Recession during, when was that, 08-ish to 2010. A lot of people had to contract, and it made more sense to have multiple generations worth of family living at home. And that's how they do it outside of the U.S. anyway, especially outside of the West. In Eastern culture, you'll have 2 or 3 generations in a household. But the difference is the grandparents are watching the kids while the middle generation works. Here in America, it's kind of like, well, you got the parents and then you got the adult children who may or may not do anything. And again, I'm not judging. There's just a hell of a lot of young adult American males who aren't really doing anything right now. So we were talking about this, and I said to my friends, I said, you know, I never really noticed this until I came back from being overseas for all those years. And of course, that's because a lot had changed. We had gone through the Great Recession. And so it's a different landscape. And there's a benefit to it, at least to the quality of life for these younger people. Like boomers, baby boomers, the generation ahead of me, which most of you watching these videos are. You guys, you mom and dad, they just wouldn't let you move back in. So if your boss was mean, your coworkers sucked, you couldn't just quit and go back home and do nothing, because you had to keep a roof over your head. You had to pay bills. You had to eat. And same thing with my generation. There were times I had jobs that I hated so much I couldn't stand it, but I had responsibilities, and I've met those responsibilities. A lot of the younger folks, younger into the millennials and the Generation Zers, they don't have that. They've been smart in not having children early. A lot of these folks, they are staying home. They might not be doing a whole lot, but they're not going out there and having kids. So that's another way they're able to do this. But listen, then they're just the true bona fide all-out beta males who, aside from not being gainfully employed and aside from staying home, they just don't work. And these aren't just Gen Zs and millennials. I mean, I know some around here, a guy used to cry about his wife being so mean. He's like right on the cusp between Gen X and I think he's like either the oldest Gen X or the youngest baby boomer. He's a deadbeat. He doesn't do anything. And he's with an alpha female. And so I asked my friends, how does this compute? You get these women who are hardworking, go-getters, they have drive, they have ambition, and it's like they obviously don't mind supporting the household and having a deadbeat beta male husband, or they wouldn't. They just throw him out. And, you know, the guy that started the trash collection business, and he's had it so long, he's retired now. He's older than me. His daughter, he gave the business to his daughter, because she's a go-getter. She has drive. She has ambition. She grew up watching mom and dad run the business. She understood the business, so she just took it over when mom and dad were ready. The mom's still doing the books, but dad's done. But he said to me, he goes, you know, they've always been there, these beta males. And he said, I had an uncle. It was his mother's brother who was one such derelict. And he said the thing of it was, he liked the guy. He was a likable guy. He was a decent enough looking guy, but he wasn't, you know, Hollywood good looking or nothing. But he just wouldn't work. He was a deadbeat. And I asked, well, why did his wife stay with him, or did she stay with him? And he said, well, we thought so until about 25 years or so ago, which was more than 20 years after both of them. She had died, and about 40 years after he had just run off and nobody knew where he went. And in my head, I said, well, this sounds like a story to me. Please tell it. And so he did. Said his mom's brother ended up marrying a girl who he said she was beautiful. She was a very beautiful woman. Said she was just kind of big. She was a big girl. She was a little over 6 feet tall, and she was almost 200 pounds, but she wasn't fat. She was big boned. She was just a big girl, but she had a beautiful face, and, you know, body was well built. She was just large. She had grown up on a farm. She got the farm when, you know, her mom and dad passed on, but she wasn't a farmer. She actually was a teacher. So she didn't make a lot of money. Teachers aren't known for making a lot of money. They've got one of the most under-respected jobs in the world, I believe. I mean, they're preparing the next generation, and they're doing so much. I hope someday they're paid what I really believe they're worth, which is more than what they're paid now. But she was doing everything she could as a teacher. The benefit she had was that, mom and dad were people of means. They did leave the farm. It was paid for. And they left her a little bit of money. But she was married to this guy's uncle, his mother's brother. And he was a deadbeat. He said they called him Gimpy because he had one leg that was about almost a foot shorter than the other, and he wore a special shoe. And I'm certainly not making fun of the guy for that, and that's not the word I applied to him. He said that's what they called him. They called him Gimpy. Said he was naturally intelligent, probably could have done anything in the world he wanted to do, but he was just lazy. He was a deadbeat, and he never seemed to be embarrassed to any degree that he had a hard-working, motivated, driven, professional, successful woman taking care of him. Didn't bother him a bit. He said old Gimpy, he spent a lot of time day drinking, and he spent a lot of time fishing in the old pond down there at the foot of the cow pasture. I guess it had been stocked at one point or another. They forgot about it. The cows went in there when they got hot in the summer, but it was full of fish. And Gimpy just sat down there, and he'd drink beer and eat fish. And my friend, when he was a child, preteens, he would go down there and he'd fish with Gimpy in the evenings of the summer or in the fall or spring if it wasn't too hot. And he shared with me that that's the first beer he ever drank was with Uncle Gimpy. And he liked him. He was a laughable guy, but he described him as being so lazy that even when he laughed, he wouldn't even move his facial features. It's just like this. It's like a and you really had to tell him a big old humdinger to get him to even do that much. So, again, I asked the question. I said, well, why did his wife stay with him? I mean, was she not embarrassed? I mean, I would imagine these women would go to work and their friends would be like, hey, has Gimpy got a job yet? Is Gimpy thinking about working yet? I mean, you're supporting you and him. And they didn't have any kids. Supporting you and him on a teacher's salary, but whatever. And he told me that there would be times when she would get frustrated, she'd had enough, and she'd tell him, you need to either get a job or get out. And she'd put him on a time frame. She said, okay, it's July 1. You're not employed by the end of July. You're homeless because you're not living here anymore. And during those times, Gimpy would go out and he'd get a job. But he'd never keep it. He'd keep it, sometimes 3 or 4 days. The most he'd ever make it would be 3 or 4 weeks. Because he just had no work ethic, no ambition, no drive, no motivation. And for some reason, this woman would always just take him back in. And it's like having a man-child, like a teenage husband type thing. And she'd support him. So anyway, around the time my friend was about 12 or 13, she told Gimpy this was his last chance. He's either going to go out there and get a job and help contribute to the household, or he was gone. And he couldn't get a job and keep it for 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks. This was it. She was serious. So he went out. He got a job. I don't even know what it was. I don't even know if the guy told me. But after a couple of weeks, he was bringing home his paychecks, and he was going on and on about how much he liked this job and how he was going to keep it. He was going to stick with this one. So he did. And the woman thought, wow, gosh, here he is. He's in his mid-50s, and he's finally going to work for a living. Well, hey, finally, she's thinking, I can retire, and I'll be okay because, he'll be bringing in something. But a couple more weeks went by, and he didn't get his paycheck. And she's like, where's your paycheck? You've been going to work every day, because he was. And he said, oh, they've got some kind of, hang up there at finance or having pay problems. They said that they'll, next pay period, they're going to give us this past pay period and this upcoming pay period. Don't worry about it. And she's like, okay, well, as long as you just keep going to work, we don't need the money. We're not going to lose the house, which is paid for because of mom and dad, if you don't get paid. So we'll wait till next pay period. Gimpy keeps going to work, and she's thinking, this is great. Yeah, he keeps this up. He might become an alpha. He might actually start providing, I might be able to retire early if he keeps this job. Well, the next pay period comes around, no paycheck. Same excuse, and she's thinking, well, maybe there's something more to this story that I don't know about. Maybe he's going somewhere else and he's not going to work. So she followed him one day. She acted like she was going off to teach, but she wasn't. She'd called in. She went down the road and she just waited for Gimpy to go because he always left a little bit after her. Well, she ended up following him. And she ended up finding out that old Gimpy had a girlfriend. Now, I might be confused. I might have the humming in my ear from my zero turn, 750cc zero turn ringing in my ear. Ears, both of them. I was wearing earplugs, but I swear I think I hear voices. Listen closely. Put your ear pods in if you got them. I'm not going to make any loud noises. So the long and short of it is, she found out old Gimpy was running around on her. He was out gallivanting around with some other gal. Now, my friend who was telling me the story told me that he just happened to go out there to his aunt and Uncle Gimpy's house one day. He was going to do some fishing with Uncle Gimpy. It was a weekend. Gimpy didn't work on the weekends. And he wanted to hear all about, his job, congratulate him on actually keeping one for more than a month or two. Old Gimpy wasn't there, and he asked his aunt, by marriage, Gimpy was the one who was blood related to, said, "Where's Uncle Gimpy?" And she said, "I hate to tell you this. You're a boy of 12 or 13 years old. You're too young to hear this kind of stuff, but Uncle Gimpy was an adulteress. He had himself a girlfriend, and I sent him packing. You won't be fishing with your Uncle Gimpy no more." And she never remarried. She was almost 60 by this time. She stayed single until she died when, this guy was, I think he was in his 20s or 30s when she died. He stayed in connection with whoever it was that got the farm or took the farm or bought the farm after he was dead. He knew who the people were, and he still would go there and fish from time to time. And about 20 years ago, which had to have been 30 or 40 years after, Gimpy got kicked out for gallivanting around and whatnot, series of big storms came in, heavy rains, and the earthen dam that supported that old pond where Gimpy and my friend used to fish all the time burst, and the pond, just all the water went out of it, flooded out of it, ran out when the dam broke, except for maybe foot and a half or so. And so my friend heard about it, and he went out to check on it. He just wanted to see it. And the family that had the pond was there. They had kids that were teenagers walking around in the pond trying to save the fish. He said, the water's only about that deep, and you could see the backs of these big old blue cats that were in there. They were trying to net them up, keep them in some kind of water, or put them where the water was pulled together until they could at least get enough of the dam fixed to keep enough of the water in there to keep these fish alive, because they didn't want to lose all their fish. They had to get the dam repaired and let the pond refill back up, and they were trying to save as many of the fish as they could. Well, they're walking around, digging down through the shallow water and in the mud, trying to get the fish, get the big fish, put them in the buckets. Somebody grabbed onto something that wasn't a fish. They pulled it up out of the water, and turns out it was a bone. It was an arm bone. It was a human bone. Well, they got out of there quick. They were scared, and they knew they'd found something that they probably shouldn't have found. So they brought in the authorities, and they pulled the entire skeletal remains of that body out of that pond that was down there. And my friend told me, he said he didn't need them to do any DNA testing or any sort of stuff like that to find out who this skeleton had previously belonged to, because one of its legs was about a foot shorter than the other. So I'll tell you what, you know what they say, nothing in life's free? I think there's a lot of beta males out there thinking they're getting a free ride off of their hard work and go-get-em women that's supporting them like a bunch of man-children. Old Gimpy thought he was getting a free ride through life. Turns out it cost him his. Hope you enjoyed this story. Hope you're enjoying your October nights. See you for more next time.